Hi first graders, it's Mrs. Nobby coming to you from my backyard, talking more today about plants. I hope you all had a great spring break. Today we're going to look more closely at plant parts. What is their function? Why do they look the way they do? And also we're going to set up an experiment on the basic needs of plants. For our first experiment today, we are going to investigate the basic needs of plants. Now in class, we talked about the basic needs of animals. We got Lizzie out, she walked around on the carpet, and we talked about animals needing, I bet you can say them with me, food, water, air, and shelter or space. Those are the basic needs every animal needs to survive. But what about plants? Do they need to eat like an animal does, or can they make their own food? So I'm going to set up an experiment with you about plants and what their basic needs are. In my first cup, it says all needs met. This is my control cup, meaning I'm going to give this plant every basic need I think it needs. The next one says no soil, so I'm going to put some seeds in without soil. This one says no sun, so I'm going to be putting it in a bag and closing it up so it can't see the sunlight. This one says no air. That means I'm going to give it all the rest of the basic needs, but I'm going to close it up in a plastic bag and not give it any air. And the last one is no water. So I'm going to give it all the rest of the needs, but just never give it any water. Now in each cup, I will be putting 3 bean seeds. I like to put 3 in to ensure that one will grow. Now make it a prediction with your parent or guardian which one you think is going to grow best. We'll check in back with this experiment in a couple weeks. So the Nobby family is working in our garden and we've just pulled up this plant. This is collard greens, but it shows beautifully all the different plant parts. You can see the roots, which helped support the plant and hold it in the ground and also soak up the water for the plant. The stems that helped hold the leaves up to capture the sunshine and also bring the water and the nutrients up. The leaves, which are the food factory, using air, sun, and water to make food for the plant. And flowers at the top to attract pollinators so that eventually it'll make more seeds and we can grow a new plant. For the next series of experiments, make sure that you've printed out the lab sheet that's above this video called Thinking About Parts of a Plant, and we're going to work through this together. So we're going to start with roots. What is the structure and what are the functions of roots? What do roots do for the plant? So in order to study roots, I have 2 raisins. One of them is just a regular old shriveled raisin. The other one I did something to. Think about what I might have done to this raisin to make it look puffed up, and when I squeeze it, it's pretty juicy. You got it, I soaked it in water overnight. Just like roots, raisins can soak up water. The purpose of roots is to soak up water and nutrients for the plant. In order to do that, I sprouted some seeds for you. The only one in this baggie that really sprouted well was a bean seed. And I want to show you roots up close. Roots have a way of knowing how to go down, and they also have root hairs. If something happens to the root hairs, the roots just can't soak up the water. They have to have those tiny hairs to be able to soak it up. Now I want to show you roots on something else. I brought all of your sweet potatoes home. Remember starting these in science lab? These sweet potatoes are doing great. This one is Harper's from Miss Lorenz's class. I just see Harper on here. And this one is from Miss Schildnick's. It says Ava and William. But they're all doing great. Now remember, sweet potatoes are a root. They're just the starchy, swollen root where they store energy, but they also grow roots. Look at that fantastic web of roots. soaking up the water for the sweet potato. So we know that roots serve to soak up the water and the nutrients, but they also act like an anchor to hold the plant into the ground and keep the soil together. So next we're going to talk about stems. Now stems usually are long and skinny like vines, or straight to hold the leaves high to the sky to be able to get sunlight for the leaves and for the plant. But what is the function of stems? How do they work? In order to examine the function of stems, we're going to set up an experiment that I'm going to let run for 24 hours overnight. So you will need to follow along with me the paper called Getting Around. If you want to do the experiment with me, you'll need a jar, some water, red dye or food coloring, and all the objects that I'm going to mention. Now I'm going to go ahead and place 10 drops of food coloring in the jar. Now I choose red because it's going to be able to show up really easily in all the objects we're testing. Okay, so we'll swirl that around a little bit and we're ready to go. Now on your sheet, I would like you to, when I'm finished, stop the video and make a prediction. How high do you think this red water will go in each object? They look like stems, they're tall and skinny, but we want to see if they act like stems, bringing up water to the top of the object. So the first object we're going to try is a piece of celery. I'm going to cut a fresh piece and stick it down in the water. Now celery is like a stem. It's actually a leaf petiole, but it functions a lot like a stem. My second object is a wooden dowel. So it's made of wood, but wood that's no longer alive. I have a plastic straw, a paper strip, and lastly, I have a white flower. Now this is actually a dogwood flower. I didn't have a carnation like it shows on your paper, but it's important to have a white flower or a flower that the red dye would show up in. Okay, so I'm going to leave this experiment to set for 24 hours and we'll see how high the red dye gets. I'm back with the results of the STEM experiment. It's the next day. Make sure that you have filled out your predictions under letter A and use B to fill out what actually happened. So I'm going to go through object by object. Let's start with the plastic straw. Now this was made of plastic, no wood involved. It only got as high as the level of the water. What about the dowel, which is wood that was once alive? It got a little bit higher than the level of the water because wood, even after it's no longer alive, can still absorb water. Now let's look at the celery. Remember we talked about celery is like a stem. First, we're going to look at the leaves. You can already see that the leaves are tinted red in some places. That's our first sign that the level of the water got all the way to the top. I'm going to cut it open and I can see little red dots where each tube is in the celery that brought up the water and the nutrients. Now I'm going to cut it this way and see if I can pull one of those tubes out. These are called xylem tubes. They get stuck in your teeth when you eat celery, but they actually serve as a tube to bring up water and nutrients and a stem. Now let's look at the dogwood plant. Now on your picture, it's a carnation. I didn't have any carnations, so I used this white flower, and we can see that there are some red places in the flower and on the leaves, meaning that this stem brought up the red water all the way to the top. The last object was the paper. It actually fell down into the water just now. Usually the water level will get up to about here because remember, paper is made from wood, which is a plant. So it does still have some properties that help it absorb the water. Notice the only two objects that brought the water all the way to the top were the living plants, the celery and the dogwood limb. A living, mature, grown-up tree can actually absorb about 1,000 gallons of water in a single day. So the last plant part we're going to talk about are the leaves. Leaves can come in many shapes and sizes. These are flat and sort of heart-shaped. These are thick, they store water, but the function of leaves is all the same. They make food for the plant. They're the food factory. They take those basic needs, air, water, sun, and nutrients from the soil, and they make their own food. It's called photosynthesis. So that's all for today about plants. Next time, I'm going to show you plant parts of the foods that we eat, and hopefully have a chance to show you how I'm going to put the sweet potatoes in the ground so we can harvest them next year as second graders. Bye, first graders. I sure miss you.